Join us on this 4.5 miles kayak from Ogmore Castle to Southerndown on the 4th of April 2021. Watch on for cinematic footage of this trip on the Vale of Glamorgan coast, including the historic Ogmore Castle, the Ewenny River, the sand dune flanked Ogmore Estuary, and the stunning cliffs and scenery of the Glamorgan Heritage coast. This 4.5 miles route took us from Ogmore Castle down the Ewenny River, where we joined the Ogmore Estuary before heading eastwards along the coast to Southerndown beach. It's a very sunny but quite chilly Sunday morning in April as we launch onto the Ewenny River just below Ogmore Castle that you can see behind us there. Beginning as a castle of earth and wood in the early 12th century, Ogmore Castle was quickly fortified in stone, before being further strengthened with a curtain wall in the early 13th century. This is our first paddle on the Ewenny River that flows down from Ogmore Castle. There's Archie in his two-taker Kinetic 100 Hydrolite kayak. Just looking quickly back upstream towards Ogmore Castle, where we launched from a bit earlier. About 3/4 of a mile downstream from Ogmore Castle, we came to where the Ewenny River flows into the Ogmore River. The river becomes very tidal from this point down, and since it was about 30 minutes after high tide, we'd start to have the assistance of the outgoing tide taking us downstream. We're just coming up to the point now where the Ewenny River flows into the Ogmore River, which joins us from the right hand side. I hope Archie doesn't take a wrong turn, or otherwise he'll end up in Merthyr instead of Southerndown. Just looking back upstream to the junction of the Ogmore and Ewenny rivers, that's the Ogmore on the left that goes up to Merthyr, and on the right you've got the Ewenny River. Just paddling underneath a bridge on the Ogmore Estuary. The estuary is of course very tidal, so you need to go down the estuary with the outgoing tide. If you're doing this route, then ideally you want to launch from Ogmore Castle shortly before high tide. This is firstly to make sure that there's enough water level in the estuary, but also to make sure that you're paddling down the estuary with the outgoing tide. The estuary is a bit shallower than we thought, so I guess there's not so much of a high tide, and there's a few rapidy sections, like this one coming up here. Hopefully Archie won't tip over and lose his bottle of cider in the water. Ideally you want to be paddling on the Ogmore Estuary within about 1.5 to 2 hours of high tide, because towards low tide the water level drops and it can become quite muddy and very shallow. There's some quite unusual terrain around the Ogmore Estuary. It's quite a narrow estuary and is bordered by sand dunes and heathland on either side. I'm using my Pro Aqua inflatable kayak today for this paddle, and Archie's using his two-taker Kinetic 100 Hydrolite, which is a hard shell sit on top kayak. The Ogmore Estuary is quite short compared to some of the other estuaries that we've paddled. The tidal section of it is only about 2 miles or so until it flows into the Bristol Channel at Ogmore-by-Sea. We're just nearing the mouth of the estuary now, so we're going to paddle out onto the sea here and then turn east and go down the coast towards Southerndown. That's looking back up the estuary. We're just paddling out of the mouth of the Ogmore Estuary onto the sea now. You've got the beach at Ogmore-by-Sea on the left hand side, and on the right hand side you've got Newton Beach. As soon as we leave the protection of the estuary, the swell starts to pick up straight away. You can feel it immediately. That's looking westwards down Newton Beach in the direction of Newton, and beyond that Porthcawl. We're just passing Ogmore-by-Sea, which is a village that sort of sprawls along the eastern side of the Ogmore Estuary. Just a quick pan around the mouth of the estuary. There's a westerly wind today which is helping us by blowing us in the direction of Southerndown. Unfortunately the tide is going out, and that means it's running against us east to west, but the wind should help us enough. We have to do this route with the outgoing tide to come down the estuary with the tide going out. The downside is we're now going against it on the sea, but the wind is with us, so we shouldn't run out of steam, hopefully. This view looking to the west shows how we swung eastwards after leaving the estuary and paddled down the coast past Ogmore-by-Sea and on to Southerndown. Looking westwards, Porthcawl reminds me of a paddle that we did last summer when we came down the Ogmore River from Merthyr past Porthcawl, ending at Rest Bay. We're leaving Ogmore-by-Sea behind now as we paddle on eastwards down the Vale of Glamorgan coastline in the direction of Southerndown. The sea definitely seems to be getting a bit choppier and rougher as we head east away from the bay. We always check the sea swell forecast before we go. We usually use surfforecast.com, which told us that it wasn't going to be too rough today, and it's not too bad. From the water you get a really good view of the amazing cliffs along the Vale of Glamorgan coast. Certainly get a better view of the cliffs from the water than you do when walking above them. This section of the coast between Ogmore-by-Sea and Southerndown is typical of the Vale of Glamorgan Heritage coast, with towering cliffs interspersed with steep, narrow valleys. There certainly are some stunning cliffs along this section of the coast. It's known as the Jurassic Coast because there's so many fossils located here from ancient times. In terms of logistics, we've left a vehicle at either end of the route. There's a small free car park right next to Ogmore Castle. There are a couple of car parks at Southerndown, although you do have to pay for them. If you've only got one vehicle, then you could use bus 303, which runs regularly between Southerndown and Ogmore Castle. Seems to be getting more choppier the further eastwards we paddle towards Southerndown. I hope Archie remembered to bring his seasickness tablets. We're less than a mile from Southerndown now, which you can see in the distance over there. The tide is going out, which means it's running east to west, as it does with all of the South Wales coastline. As you'll be aware, the Kayak Crew tend to navigate by pubs, and there's a few great pubs on and around this route. You've got the Pelican at Ogmore next to the castle. You've got then the Three Golden Cups in Southerndown and West Farm in Southerndown as well. This 4.5 miles paddle from Ogmore Castle to Southerndown is part of our undertaking to paddle the 870 miles or so all around the Wales coast. This is taking us to parts of the Welsh coast that we've never been to before. If you enjoyed this video, then please give us a thumbs up and consider clicking on the left below to subscribe to our channel to get updates about trip reports, product review videos and kayaking guides. Click on the right below to be taken to our playlist of our other videos of paddles around the Wales coast. Please check out our website link below for our blogs and other super useful information. Happy paddling from the Kayak Crew.